My name is Stephen, and this is my story. I grew up in the Snowy Mountains. It's about 500 kilometres south of Sydney, and I grew up on a farm which had mainly sheep, cattle and horses. Bishop. It was great. It was pretty tough sometimes. Our school was 60 kilometres trip each way. And at the end of the day, you had to, come home and feed all the animals. But it was also pretty cool. We had awesome weekends where we just got to spend the whole time riding horses or, mustering sheep or bringing a whole heap of friends out and just swimming in the river. School for me when I was younger was pretty tough. I was pretty tired by the end of the day. It started at about 6 o'clock when we got up to catch the school bus, and Mum and Dad had to drive us about 15 kilometres up the road to catch the bus. But there was about 15 to 20 people in my kindergarten class, all the way up until about year 6 or 7. And then we got less and less up until year 12 when I had 12 other people in my class, which was pretty small, but it meant that everyone was friends. It meant that everyone knew everyone's first name, last name, dad's name, mum's name, grandparents. So when I was in year 9, I actually decided that I wanted to leave school. I didn't want to be there anymore. And I had grand plans of turning 15 and leaving school and becoming a shearer. But one of my teachers, convinced me to stay for a bit longer. And then once I got towards the end of year 10, I was like, I really want to keep going. I really want to go to uni. So I, really knuckled down and actually started putting in some hard yards and did the work. After year 12, I did what a lot of people do and took a gap year. Did some travelling overseas and worked on the farm and in the pub in the local town. Saved up a bit of money and then, decided to come to uni and be a teacher. My year on the farm, basically, we'd get up as soon as the sun got up, so it depended on what season it was. I'm kind of a fan of winter because you get to sleep that little bit longer. Every day was different. Like, we had a really diverse range of things, so you could be fencing one day, weed spraying the next. We always have shearing, which is a good week of, bringing the sheep in, then shearing, mulesing, drenching. We've got the cattle and then the horses as well. So I spent quite a lot of that year breaking in horses from the mountains. He's only been taught to lead for the last week, and he's actually out of a Brumby mare that came from up in the mountains. So he's part of a breeding program that we're starting for horses from the mountains. Our farm is one of the farms that gets Brumbies from the Snowy Mountains, and we spend a lot of time just working with them, getting them quiet, getting them able to be ridden and then selling them on as kids' ponies. My grandma and grandpa and my auntie and uncle and my mum and dad all bought adjoining properties, and so throughout my life I've lived in all 3 of those houses.
That's where they come from.
At school, I had been talking to my teachers and I was like, what do you think I should do? What am I good at? And went through that whole process. And one of my teachers recommended that I do teaching. She thought that I'd be good at it. So I applied for teaching, and that's what I got into. And that's when I decided that, I was going to have to move to Sydney to go to uni, but that's what had to happen, So coming to uni was a pretty big culture shock. I went from pretty much knowing everyone in town, being able to walk down the main street and, meeting at least 10 people that you knew, to not knowing anyone at all. Didn't really know anyone in Sydney. The first couple of weeks were really tough, but I got involved with a mentor program that the uni runs, and they introduced me to 5 or 6 people that were doing teaching as well. And that really helped because it meant that I actually knew people, so I could hang out after class at, have some lunch or have a beer at the uni bar, or just meet up with them on the weekends. We could study in the library, and it meant that I actually knew some people. Towards the end of that degree, I decided that I knew that I wasn't going to be a teacher once I finished, but I wanted to finish it because I was so close and I'd worked so hard and so many people had actually helped me out. So once graduation came up, it was actually really exciting for my family to be able to come and celebrate with me. So I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts and a Diploma of Education. So I'm a high school teacher, and I majored in English, English as a second language, and drama. This is my dorm room. I've been here for 7 years. In the beginning, I only intended to live on campus for 6 months, and 7 years later, I'm still here. But that's because it kind of gives you pretty much everything that you need. For me, the big thing was there was a lot of other country kids that lived here. Everyone's in the same boat. They come here not really knowing anyone, coming here specifically for uni, and it kind of makes you instant friends just because you're all sharing that similar experience. So this is the common room where everyone hangs out, has a bit of a break, plays a bit of pool and watches big screen telly. But the other element is that there's a lot of international students as well. So one thing that I really liked is learning about cultures from all around the world. We've got people from 32 different countries. So it's really interesting to live one-on-one with those kinds of people and actually find out what it's like to live in their country, how they do things differently. Kind of like being able to travel the world without having to go very far at all. Once I decided I didn't want to be a teacher, I knew that I still wanted to work with children. I knew that I wanted to do something with disadvantage because that's the reason I got into teaching in the first place. So I did an English honours degree and I looked at portrayals of masculinity in children's literature focusing on Indigenous masculinity. I was looking at that in terms of trying to change policy because a lot of the stories for young adults about Aboriginal boys are pretty depressing and pretty awful. So I was trying to affect a bit of change there. And it was at the end of that degree that they offered me a place in a law degree. And I was like, yep, that's exactly where I need to be. That's exactly what I want to do. I can get into the grassroots, change policy, and actually affect some change. So the whole time I've been at uni, I've been on scholarships. So a lot of different scholarships, like Commonwealth supported ones, as well as ones from the uni. I knew that I wanted to do juvenile justice from the very beginning. That's why I took law in the first place. It actually started even before teaching. I knew that I wanted to work with kids in some capacity. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but that's why teaching was an option for me. When I was younger, I travelled quite a lot with my grandparents to a lot of Indigenous communities and saw a fair bit of disadvantage there. And I suppose coming from the country as well, wanting to encourage people to kind of, stay in school as long as you can. And quite a lot of my friends at the end of year 10 left school, either because they had to or because they wanted to, rather than looking at traditional ideas of restorative justice. I want to try and get in there and, shake things up a bit, get different programs going, look at getting kids going back to school rather than going to jail and that kind of stuff. So when I was travelling with my grandparents, we went all over Australia, pretty much every state, looking at things like School of the Air in the Northern Territory. It really brings forward, this idea that there are people that will work really, really hard to go to school, whereas it's quite easy for people that don't want to or don't know that they want to. And having gone through that myself, gone through that period of I don't really want to be at school, I don't really like it, I think had it been easier for me to leave, I probably would have. And so I think we've really got to look at ways of making it more interesting or ways of being more engaging or, ways of bringing stuff that kids like into schools and trying to keep them there for as long as possible. I actually thought it was just doing a law degree. For a while there, I was just really tired, but as the weeks went on, I got a bit sicker and I was actually getting night sweats and, just hot flushes. I didn't think much of it at all. When you're 25, the first thing they test for isn't cancer. So it took about 4 months to find out. And then from there, it was a pretty quick process. They got me straight into chemotherapy, and which was good in a way, but it was also meant that I was, juggling uni and going to chemo. So letting me do my work in the hospital was really great, and so like the uni was as well. So it really helped in that way. They didn't actually find it anywhere. I had a form of blood cancer, so it's pretty much systemic, it's all over your body. So I had what they call anaplastic large cell lymphoma, which is a fancy way of saying blood cancer. And I think Initially, I reacted to it with a bit of shock. I was more worried about graduating on time than anything else. So I was wondering how that was going to interfere with that kind of stuff. Within 3 or 4 weeks of, starting treatment, I was going to uni with a beanie on and, trying to look hip and not let on what was going on. After 3 months of treatment, I got given the all clear and still in remission at the moment. So it takes a while for them to, to say you're completely done, but it's looking pretty good at the moment. Haven't really thought about the graduation stuff as much as I should have. I've just started applying for jobs pretty much anywhere I can get my foot in, mainly looking at family law. So I want to do some work in the family law court and then move over as soon as I can to juvenile justice. Uni's been absolutely life-changing for me. You can't really measure the change that it's made of. It's nearly 1/3 of my life that I've spent here, so it's been pretty influential. So going to uni is always going to have an air of difficulty in it, but it's never going to be as difficult as you think that it is. I think if you get that opportunity, like for me it was quite hard. I didn't actually know what university was about. I suppose the best piece of advice that I could give is, what's the worst that can happen? If you really, really hate it, which I doubt, you can always go home, but you'll never know unless you give it a shot. So that's the attitude I went with. My name is Stephen, and this is my story. I grew up on the land in the Snowy Mountains in New South Wales. I went to a small school with a graduating class of 13 students. After high school, I worked on the family farm. In 2011, I was diagnosed with a form of blood cancer. So university's been important to me because it's helped me find a direction. So I'm in my final year of graduate law and I'm looking forward to working in juvenile justice.